quick housekeeping items to start with. I'd like to sincerely thank my LEC counterparts for determining that I was in fact the right person to give this. Thanks, guys. And notice I'm up against a few things. First of all, I didn't include a puppy. Shame on me. Apologize for that in advance. And I realize I am standing between you and a few closing remarks and getting some lunch and getting on the road. I cut it down from like 67 slides to 63. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So I think we all realize in an invasive species situation what we're up against with the size and scale of Lake Erie and all the hurdles that are benefits to native species, but hurdles in a control respect. So we're all aware of what we're dealing with here. Basically, this is going to be kind of a timeline approach to look at kind of how we arrived where we are and then talk about where we are going forward. So in the timeline fashion, here's kind of a beginning of grass carp background in Lake Erie. I think you're all aware, it was referenced already, the first grass carp were detected in the 1980s. States were in different phases of either allowing or not allowing grass carp or potentially triploids. By the end of the 80s, I believe, I think most of the regional states ended up where we are now. Red states don't allow grass carp at all. Yellow states are triploid only. And there are states outside of the Great Lakes region that do still allow diploid grass carp. But basically, we started out with low frequency detections. Probably wasn't a lot of concern at the time. That continued through the 2000s, but kind of the recent history starts in 2012. And I certainly think we can point to a greater regional awareness of Asian carp and the serious concerns with the other Asian carp species. But along with that, we got better recognition and better reports of grass carp. And kind of the starting point for this talk was 2012 when there were young grass carp captured in the Sandusky River. It was kind of the first major red flag saying you don't just have adult fish, you have young fish, and they were potentially produced in the system. And at the same time, Michigan identified that some of their commercially caught grass carp were in fact diploids. So that's sort of where everything began. So moving forward from that point, 2012, 4 young grass carp caught in the Sandusky. They were diploid, and their likely origin was the Sandusky. It did kind of kick off ploidy testing and the recognition that we need to document whether these are sterile triploid releases or escapes, or if these are diploids that are reproducing. At the same time, some of the early modeling, flow modeling work was started, and it did confirm that these buoyant eggs in the Sandusky River could potentially hatch before they make it out of the river and have a lower survival possibility. So I'd like to thank Tammy Newcomb for one of the early names with the Grass Carp Working Group, which was one of the first early attempts of LEC agencies coming together and deciding where are we, what do we need to know, where do we need to go with all of this. At a similar time, the ministry was setting up eDNA sampling to begin surveillance in their waters for the Asian carp species. And it was recognized through the LEC agencies that we need to do a better job of documenting these captures. So as an example, here are the sites that the ministry, I believe it's similar to what you're currently using, Brian, started monitoring for eDNA. There have not been any recent detections from what I understand. So it kind of checks off the northern portion of the lake and distribution that they aren't widespread. And moving on to 2013, there were additional surveillances. DFO had a surveillance from a recreational capture. And so these research conversations started to kind of intensify, and we really started to look as LEC agencies, what do we need to know? What information gaps are there? We don't know much about behavior. We need to have better ways to detect these individuals. We need to look at gear efficiencies. We have lots of survey gear, lots of fishery gear. How effectively are these gears capturing them? Because for other reasons, there's lots of gear in the water, and we need to know more about early life stages. So at the same time, Ohio kind of kicked off their formal ploidy testing. We actually distributed ploidy testing kits around the state. So when species like grass carp are encountered, we'd have the materials to collect ploidy samples. And this is when even more robust accounting of captures started. And to kind of give you a scale, 2012, 2013, we were still under 20 detections or captures Lake Erie wide, and it was primarily seine and trap net, and also some other like bow fishing observations or agency electrofishing. Moving into 2014, everything really got rolling. As you've already seen referenced multiple times, the telemetry grass carp tagging started early in 14. Palladium nodolith microchemistry became more prevalent, and research aimed at determining the origin of these fish got underway. And probably as important as anything in an early life stage sense, the egg sampling in the tributaries, and specifically the Sandusky River, got started. I don't know how many in this room, probably quite a few of you, got to take part in the Michigan, Ohio, and region-wide partner planned response action in Michigan waters of Lake Erie took place. I think it really kind of put everything in perspective for all of us. And at the time, I remember thinking this is kind of a good surrogate. So if we get other Asian carp species, this is the type of action we might, participate in to capture other Asian carp. But it was perfect to learn kind of that initial crack at where grass carp, can we capture them, and we were reminded, if we didn't realize it, that this is a big system. Even when there are obvious habitats they might be in, they aren't easy to catch. At the same time, we're starting to see increased captures, or at least increased recognition of captures in the commercial fishery, and Michigan started formally collecting grass carps from the commercial industry. And in Ohio, they were added to our commercial capture list, so it was legal to harvest grass carp when our commercial fishermen encountered them. Just as a quick summary, the large action that took place in Michigan, lots of boats, different techniques, primarily electrofishing, but also in combination with nets. One of the early things I remember learning from this is that the grass carp like the hot ponds in early fall. So lots of a large system, lots of effort, and if it wasn't obvious prior to this, it isn't just easy to go out and catch grass carp. So moving on, telemetry is continuing, of course. We're continuing to try to hit this goal. So yeah, there we go. Trying to hit this goal of 50 tagged. We're up to 9 at this point. And in 2015, if you remember, it was a very wet year, large rain events, and we got the first confirmation of eggs, of fertilized eggs floating down the Sandusky River with UT and USGS and Ohio DNR work. And river raisin was also being sampled, but there weren't any eggs. And at the same time, vegetation mapping was started kind of as a background to look at potential impacts in nearshore areas and bay areas. And along with this, the Ohio DNR also started a certified triploid, kind of an undercover operation to look at, we allow grass carp and they're required to be triploid, but is that in fact the case? And we got some really good results showing that we did have 100% triploidy in all the fish that were purchased and tested. So if you're not familiar with the egg work, I assume most of you are because it's been well publicized. This is the hydrograph from the Sandusky River in 2015. We knew that they preferred high flow events. That's what they need for the egg physiology, for the eggs to hatch and not settle out. And every blue dot was when eggs were collected. So you can see that even though it wasn't a high number of eggs, they were certainly associated with high flow events. And at the same time, coming back to the GLADHOS tags, we have more and more receivers out each year that we're able to kind of look at movements and look at how these fish respond to environmental conditions associated with spawning and staging. So getting closer to recent times, 2016, we're up to 32 grass carp tagged. And if you remember 2016, it was a very dry year. Dry, no massive rain events, no flow events, and resultingly there were no eggs captured. So we're seeing that, that it is very environmentally dependent, and that they are kind of they're only likely to try and spawn when we have these big flow events. The flu egg model got further refined, and it allowed us to start looking at where did these eggs originate from? Where is the spawning taking place? Turns out that it's primarily further upstream in the Fremont area, in the same general area that walleye spawn in earlier in the year. Planning was started for the action that we did last year. Actually had grass carp showing up in other jurisdictions too. New York had some bow fishing individuals in Dunkirk Harbor, and one from electrofishing. And we started walking through the structured decision-making process with the workshops that were sponsored by Michigan and run by Michigan State. Mark Dufour was involved in that. You've heard his name mentioned a few times today. And moving forward, this was really a great process from a lot of different perspectives. So it certainly kind of framed the situation. It took all the information we knew and used it to inform where we're heading. And beyond that, I really see it in this most recent workshop that we had a few months ago. I think really showed how it was great at bringing people together. So LEC agencies, federal agencies, provincial agencies, and universities, that as much as anything, this was a forum to put us all together and allow us to frame the situation. And the modeling and everything that's gone into this has led to, or at least our initial removal targets. So now we have a target to shoot for, around 370 fish that we're trying to remove each year now. And additional information will feed back into that, and we'll see how good of a target that was. So getting into the more current information, we are at 50 fish tagged. Obviously, these fish have been tagged for a while, so we have mortalities. We don't have 50 live fish, but acoustic tags have been implanted in 50 fish total, and we're getting great information from them every time we have a download. We had another wet year in 2017, and we caught lots of eggs. University of Toledo, USGS, ODNR Techs, and others were out, and we went from less than 10 eggs in 2015 to just less than 10,000 eggs in 2017. So I think we're kind of seeing the range of environmental conditions and egg production, and surprise, surprise, like other fish in Lake Erie, it's very annually variable recruitment, or potential recruitment in this case. And we also added the Maumee as another tributary that clearly there's some at least attempted reproduction, as eggs were also caught in the Maumee during one of the highest flow events in July. And Jim, I think you need to look a little harder. We still haven't found an egg in a Michigan tributary yet, but yeah, let's keep it that way, right? So the structured decision-making workshop wrapped up, obviously, and we had the planned action in the Sandusky River, and I really think this was the next obvious step, and we learned a lot from it in the sense that, so that the first big event was kind of a see what we're capable of doing, see how teams can work together. But this one specifically was looking at how can we refine the gear? What gears can we use? And thanks to DFO for using trammel nets and bringing those down and showing us how to use them. We were really able to use Clio's information from the telemetry. We identified that the lower Sandusky River is where these fish are late in the summer at low flows when the action was taking place. And we went out from the turnpike to Sandusky Bay. We identified stretches of the river and fished trammel nets, gill nets, electrofished in conjunction, and really saw that trammel nets paired with electrofishing, and specifically enclosing areas and then shocking within the trammel net, is the best way to go. But even more interesting than that, we got a good look at habitat. At that time of year, in summer conditions, low flow conditions, they weren't in vegetation where you might have expected them to be. They were along shorelines that had trees, both terrestrial trees and trees that had fallen. They were on gradual sloping areas that led to a drop-off, kind of flat type areas. And they were associated with flatheads, which was really interesting. If we caught big flathead catfish, we also caught grass carp, And if you were catching buffalo or things that weren't flatheads, you didn't catch grass carp. So right away, at least in this specific scenario, we're kind of seeing some species assemblages and some habitat preferences even outside of what acoustics have already shown us. To put everything in perspective, we are around 30 to 40 grass carp captured per year lately, and you see the seine fishery is a large component of that, seines, to a lesser extent trap nets, and then also bow fishing and agency and federal sampling. But even with the extremely increased awareness, we're still in that less than 50 a year phase, so it makes that 370 look kind of daunting. But I'm sure we can make some improvements on this, especially with the plans that I'm going to talk about right now. So lessons learned: grass carp can be removed, especially commercially, but isn't necessarily easy. The management response can be complex. Obviously we have a large system, the fish are difficult to capture, and we need more information to focus these response actions for sure. And the science that's going on to inform these management responses, include reproduction. We have reproduction occurring. Recruitment appears to be intermittent based on age samples from adult fertile fish. We're identifying these locations, but there's still a long way to go. And we're really honing in on this gear efficiency, but there's always new and better ways. And Michigan just had a neat kind of barrier, how do we keep keep Asian carp out event. Maybe we can look at some further ingenuity to maybe catch more grass carp too. But I would argue the process is working. The management needs are absolutely guiding the science, and then the science is further informing future management, but there's still uncertainty. We need additional information to feed into the SDM process. We need to get a better handle on population size and things like migration. And the LEC is involved in implementing the science, refining the actions, and meeting the obligations. This is a great case of LEC agencies working together, collaborating with federal and university and provincial partners, and it really is kind of it's good to see it come together like this for sure. As far as next steps with management, we're going to obviously continue to keep up with the surveillance and capture documentation. We're going to continue to test ploidy. The responses are going to be scheduled and adaptive and kind of lead toward this targeted removal total that we're trying to hit. It has to be a coordinated and adaptive plan, and you're seeing that in 2018 with everything that's currently planned. We're going to go back into the Sandusky River in June. A little different timing. We'll be reaching out to partners like Cleo that have information and further inform this June action, but we're not going to play around as much with the gear. We're going to use the trammel nets that we know work and combine them with electrofishing and really see how many can we catch, bringing everyone together and knowing what we know with the current situation. And then Roger Knight and a group from the LEC are working on a 5-year response strategy formally for the LEC to work off of. And we're going to continue to use science, obviously. We're going to continue to better understand reproduction. Where are the streams other than the Sandusky or Maumee, if there are any, that are producing grass carp? What are the recruitment mechanisms? That's not well understood. We know it's highly variable, but we don't know what's driving it other than potentially flow conditions and what follows them. We have to continue to nail down these high-use habitats and learn more about the migration patterns, and hopefully this will all inform the population size and the appropriate targeted removals. So I don't have 63 slides. With that, I'd be happy to take any of your questions, and thanks for your time and attention for sure.